Hello and welcome back, this is ProTelDev back with another game development video. This time what we're going to be looking at is a new game that I'm planning out, a new game that's specifically going to be tied around the genre Tycoons or simulators. We're going to look at the difference between each other in a second. So the game that we're going to be creating is going to be called Dungeon Farm Tycoon. Before we have a look at what the difference is between simulators and tycoons, I want to first explain that this is a game that I've just specifically chose myself. It's not going to be part of a game jam. It's very much something I'm going to be looking at that I've chosen specifically because I've never done something like this. I've never done the type of game that we're going to be working on, and so I really think it's going to be a really fun experience to try out. And the other thing I'm going to be doing is I'm not really going to be doing too much art and pixel stuff. Another thing to mention is that this is going to be 16-bit. The reason why it's going to be 16-bit is because there's actually a game pack that I'm really interested in, and I haven't done 16-bit game in such a long time, not since the Eat and Split game, which was like 2 or 3 years ago. So I've not done an 18-bit game in a while, and I really want to kind of look at it. It's also the easiest to kind of create art for. And so even though I've just mentioned then that I don't want to create the art, if I have to, then 16-bit will allow me to create something very, very quickly. The other thing is that I've already kind of chosen what art I want to go with for the base of the game, and that is by using the 3 art that was available, the pixel art that was available online. In the on itch.io there's a bunch of free packs that you can download that people have nicely created for anyone to use, and one of them that I've done is the one I'm going to be using is the Pixel Holes overworld tile set, which is the free version, and as well as the grass extension, which is also free. I'm going to be using that, and that's by Pixel Hole, so that's free to download, link in the description. So let's move on and look at the differences between tycoons and simulators. So the big thing to mention is that simulators and tycoons, especially in this day and age, usually revolve around currency of some kind or some kind of point system, that the ultimate goal is to try and get to a position where you have infinite amount of gold or a tremendous amount of it, that or currency, that you can pretty much do whatever you want, you can be as creative as you want and build whatever you want. So ultimately, what are the differences? Well, a simulator game and a tycoon game are relatively the same. However, it's very much changed in the more recent days as technology's gotten better and games are able to push out more advanced techniques and AI. So the big difference with tycoon games is that, and simulator games, is a tycoon game is all about economy. It's all about both of the game's genres are all about management and using those basic skills to do management. But tycoons don't require that much skill. You usually, when you have it on, the game will allow you to, for the most part, complete it. And it's really about being creative with where things like placement is, and kind of managing that, getting to the gold, getting to the currency goal as quickly as possible. Simulators are a little bit different because they require a lot more advanced features. For example, you still may have the goal of getting a certain amount of money, but there will usually be underlying objectives and much more complicated aspects. However, what sets simulator games apart from tycoon games is usually have underlying advanced mechanics. So things like, if we look at Planet Coaster, you'll have things like happiness, management of the park, certain sites which may improve certain areas, and these counteract different effects to lower or increase the outcome of being able to get an increased currency. So what's the difference between, well, why isn't a tycoon doing the same thing? Well, the things with the tycoon is it's very limited and very sometimes unrealistic and less like real life economy. And that's what simulators hopefully are trying to push into, especially in modern days, that they are trying to replicate what a real life economy would be, especially around a business. So with Planet Coaster over Roller Coaster Tycoon, Roller Coaster Tycoon, ultimately you just get more money. There is a happiness aspects to it, but it's relatively simple. You will accumulate and unlock better rides and build things, and ultimately the creativity is really in creating these roller coasters and ultimately where you place them. While a simulator is much more about the underlying mechanics of, for example, guests will get on the overarching mechanic is that you want to keep the happiness up. It's just a much more advanced version of a Tycoon game essentially, and it's usually requires so much more mechanics to kind of make the games more replayable, as opposed to a Tycoon, which can't be. The replayability is really in the creativeness of things like creating roller coasters and things like that, while a simulator's replayability is basically determined by how everything works together and coexists together through the different systems. So ultimately a simulator and a Tycoon game are one and the same, however a simulator game is much more advanced. It also highlights a bunch more mechanics like behaviours of different things, different management aspects, and it really plays into much more skill based decision making, while a Tycoon game ultimately you will go and make the similar decisions all the way through to hit a goal. Once you know what that thing is, you will usually follow that same path. That doesn't mean though that Tycoons are inferior to simulators in a lot of ways. There are a lot of Tycoon games that people really enjoy even to this day and really want to go back to those Tycoon games, especially in recent years. However, simulator games are still very much prominent, and most Tycoon games now are just called simulator games. There's nothing wrong with that. However, just for the sake of nostalgia and because I won't have extremely advanced mechanics and systems, because I don't want this to be an extremely long project, I'm going to drop it down to a Tycoon game, and that's why it's in the title. So I've talked a little bit about the differences there. Ultimately, they are one and the same, except the simulator is usually a much more advanced version with a lot more mechanics. So, what about my game? Where do I want to take my game in relation to a Tycoon game? Well, I want to still be able to have the player build up, again, a currency. In this case, it's going to be gold. And this is going to be much more of a fantasy-styled game. You're going to be able to unlock shops and different kind of buildings, and that will help you to get a community going. So the idea is that you will have a village that you can build up, and next to that village is going to be a very basic dungeon. So again, this game is called Dungeon Farm Tycoon, so you're going to be able to farm your own dungeons, but when you first start you'll just have one basic dungeon already done. So again, all these different buildings will have different effects. You want kind of people to come in and to be able to go to these dungeons and ultimately generate currency and gold, which allow you to again build more buildings and be able to unlock even better dungeons and keep on going. Again, you'll be able to place the buildings wherever you like, and it will try and add some kind of variation of how you want to interact, some kind of system where it will increase maybe value or decrease value for what gold you might be earning. So ultimately, it's similar to other Tycoons. You want to build up your currency, your gold, and you want to be able to unlock better dungeons that will attract more people, and better stores and things like weapon stores, potion stores, things like that, which will essentially increase your gold and do the same thing, rinse and repeat. And the creativeness will be in the placement of where you do these things, add in more docks maybe to increase more people to come to them, and increasing the overall amount of people that will be arriving. So that is the general goal of this Tycoon. It's very simple, very basic, and it's really about mechanics inside that will change how you play it. The other thing I want to do, which is later, which I want players to be able to unlock, is the ability to be able to venture into these dungeons and potentially even create these dungeons in some way with randomness and gold, and basically increase their level so that you can customize these dungeons a little bit, and that will add to this creativity aspect. So that's the overall plan for this game, and I want to do this probably, I want to work on this for maybe a month or two, we'll see. There will still be game jams once every month, just like we did the Clubby the Clay Ball last month. at the end of last month. We'll be doing another game jam at some point this month, most likely next week or the week after. And what we'll be doing through this though is we'll be continuing this game until I have a somewhat finished product. However, it's going to be still simplistic. It's not going to be like a Turtle Trial, which took a year, or a Corrupting Spring, which was worked on for about 5 months. It's not going to be like that. It's going to be a game that works on for maybe a month or 2, we'll see. And it's a game that I can just keep working on whenever I have free time. So let's go into it now. So that was the planning aspects. I've really thought it over what I was going to do. I also want the island to be very basic, so we're going to have it start off with a tutorial island, which will teach all the basic things, and then the next level will be something more advanced. You'll have a goal that you've got to reach, and that will unlock an area. And then I'm hoping one level will have like a free build aspect to it, where you have infinite money and you can kind of build what you want, and potentially an unlock system, although I'm debating whether to do that because an unlock system is usually quite advanced and takes a while, but we'll see if I can do that. So let's go into Unita and let's have a look at what I've got so far. So with the planning out of the way, what I then did was I worked on a very basic game using the pixel hole. I created a tile map, and this is what we've got. Okay, so now we're in Unita, and this is what I created. So this is just, there's no real script apart from a custom grid script, but ultimately it's just a tile map with 3 different tile maps, one for the paths and buildings, one for scenery, and one for ground. We're going to be able to interact with individual buildings as prefabs, which you'll be able to place on our custom grid, which matches the same grid as the tile map. And there's not much that's actually happened yet, so I've moved the camera slightly out, and if I quickly go into play, what you'll see is that I've got the placement already kind of figured out, and so you can place them on your grid. Does a little bit of a wiggle, but that's fine, we'll fix that later. But ultimately you can place these buildings down on this grid, and that's all I've really done so far. So you can't actually physically place them though. I've not added the instantiate the buildings yet because this was just a test, but ultimately it's the selection of what block to place on this specific tile. So imagine this was a building, we'd be able to place them in specific areas, and maybe there'll be some way for the player to know if it increases or decreases sales, we'll see. But that's all we got so far, and I've basically created the area on the tile map. So if I quickly go into the ground and then go into the tile palette, this is the sprites that we got. So this was the sprite sheet, the master simple, which was the sprite sheet that came with WholePixel's free version. And what we're going to do with it is we can just place these items down. So if I were to grab, like, say, this rock, we'd be able to place this down depending on what we're on. And this is really simple, simplistic stuff. It's really nice that they've given us quite a few things here. So we have a few different buildings we can place down. And what we're going to do though is I may actually change this tile map for buildings and paths, because I kind of want them, you know, you shouldn't be able to build a building on a path. I don't want that to be a thing. And I want you to be able to, you can only maybe place a building next to a path. I want the player to be able to build their own paths. So I'm kind of going to get rid of this tile map most likely and just make it so that these are their own prefabs that you can spawn in when you click. And the other thing I did was the script, so the custom grid. So this is laid on top of our tile map, and it's all correctly layered. So if I quickly press this and then go to scene again, and then I click on the tiles, you'll see that they're pretty much matched up to each other. There's some slight differences, but we have a selection point, which if we quickly look at the script now, and let this load up, it's a really basic script that just spawns a new position. So all we're doing is we're getting a select point, and we got our shop, which is a building, and these are just two different game objects, and all we're doing is updating positions basically where the grid size is. So we determine the grid size, which is how big the tile map is, we match them out, we round it up, and we just make it so that depending on where the mouse point is for the camera, so where this mouse is, we get that position and then assign it to our select point, so that's constantly updating, and then we make it so that the shop is constantly changing to that position, which is determined by our position here. Hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully I've explained that well, we'll see. But basically this shop gets updated before, which I might change the position of that so it updates after. It doesn't really matter too much. I mean, I can change that later, and I'll probably add to this script a lot in the future. So that's pretty much all I've got so far. I've only just started this project, and we'll see where it takes us on our journey to making a decent Tycoon. So this has been ProTailDev, and I'll see you next time.